Community Engagement and Outreach Manager. On behalf of the staff here at Town Hall Seattle and our friends at Elliott Bay Books, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our presentation with Stephanie Land and Sara K. Runnels. Stephanie Land's new book, Class, a Memoir of Motherhood, Hunger, and Higher Education, is the subject of tonight's talk. As we get underway, I would like to acknowledge our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. We're grateful to have you joining us tonight as part of our 25th anniversary season. Our presentation will run for about 60 minutes, including the Q&A, and our Q&A portion of the event will be digital. This evening, you can submit your questions by scanning the QR code that will appear on the screen. As always, you can help us out by keeping your questions concise. Also a reminder, if you are online, you can view the closed captions by clicking the CC button in the bottom right corner of your video player. Town Hall's calendar is dynamic. We add new events all the time. I'd like to plug 2 upcoming programs you might be interested in. Next Monday, our Tandem Book Club is meeting to discuss Monsters by Claire Dederer before our event with the philosopher Alva Noe. Our book club had a great discussion of Maid last season, so fans of Stephanie's may want to check out the book club. Also next week, don't miss our neighbors from Wheel, the homeless and formerly homeless women who make up this amazing advocacy organization, sharing their experiences and poetry. You can find more information about events like these on our website. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. As part of our Arts and Culture series, this event is supported by For Culture, Arts Fund, and the City of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture. Town Hall is also a member-supported organization. Thank you so much, members. If you share Town Hall's vision of a community strengthened by discourse and access to fresh ideas, please consider supporting us by donating or becoming a member. And lastly, if you haven't already picked up your signed copy of Stephanie's book, you can pick up your copy of Class from the Elliott Bay Books table in the lobby. Stephanie Land is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Maid, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive, called a testimony worth listening to by the New York Times and inspiration for the Netflix series Maid. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, The Guardian, The Atlantic, and many other outlets. Her writing focuses on social and economic justice and parenting under the poverty line. She is a frequent speaker at colleges and national advocacy organizations. Sara K. Runnels is a seasoned humor writer, copywriter, and writer living in Seattle, Washington. She is a regular contributor to The New Yorker, and her satire has been featured in publications like McSweeney's, Betches, and Overheard. Sara has also spent more than 15 years pushing corporate boundaries by writing fun and edgy copy for a variety of popular brands. Her witticisms, viral one-liners, and sharp social commentary can be found quite literally all over the internet. She specializes in clever dating and relationship content and always has something to say about politics, pop culture, and the Pacific Northwest. Please join me in welcoming Sara K. Runnels and Stephanie Land.
Hi. It is truly an honor to be here tonight with you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Congratulations on book number 2. I read it in one sitting, and I'm really excited to chat about it tonight. Let's jump right in. So you've been doing a lot of press and interviews lately, and you've been on several book tour stops before this one. What is your least favorite question you've been asked so far?
Are you gonna
I'm gonna cross it off just in case.
Least favorite. I don't know if there's a season 2. I'll just say that right now.
Okay, great. Assuming a lot of our audience has read Maid and seen the series, can you give an overview about where Class picks up from the end of that story?
Yeah. So Maid ends like kind of right when we get to Missoula, beginning of 2012, and I ended the book kind of on a literal high note. You know, we're on top of a mountain, overlooking things. It's very woohoo, and people have said over the years like. I'm so glad you got your happy ending, and I always thought like, well, it got like so much worse after that. So this is that story. The book begins about a year and a half after Maid ends, and it's the start of my senior year of college and my daughter's first day of kindergarten, and the thing that I found really interesting about that is there were a lot of parallels between my experience as a low-income student, college student, and her experience as the child of a low-income parent in public school. And originally this book was going to be more reported and like narrative nonfiction, and so I was going to spend the whole entire book on looking at barriers that college students face, and then I was going to have this chapter on focusing on just on her in kindergarten, and so it was kind of fun to be able to go between those two worlds that we were both in, and there was no shortage of content. It was a very busy year, and so it really starts and ends with that school year.
Yeah. I love that class, the title, takes on several meanings and layers in your book. Class as a socioeconomic status, class as literally what you and your daughter were attending in school, and class kind of as manners, as in like people who were a little classless as far as like judgments about like life choices. There's a layer of that to it. Did you have the title in mind before you started writing, or was it something that came to you as you wrote?
I honestly don't remember. I think when it was still, before it was an actual memoir, I came up with that title. So if you can't tell, I really like one word, double meaning. So it was really perfect. And it ended up being even more so as I started writing.
Of those three meanings, or perhaps just of motherhood, hunger, and higher education, which did you find the toughest to write about?
Probably motherhood.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the easiest in a sense that that's what I enjoy writing about the most. It's really my favorite part of being a writer is being to record in scene, you know, these moments that stick out in my mind so well, because you know I never had a baby book or anything like that, and but it's also the hardest because they are children, and they, you know, I mean, Story, my daughter goes by her middle name Story now, and she's 16, so. It's hard to keep them in mind when I'm writing it and not do anything that she might be embarrassed by in high school. And then Coraline, you know, makes an appearance in this book, and like quite literally, she's born at the end of the book. And when I told her that, when I said, because she really, really wanted a book about her, because her older sister got a book about, and so I said, well, you're in it. You're just kind of actually inside of me, and then you're born at the end. And she said, well, that's a weird place to bring in a new character. So I was just like, you know what? I am going to tell everybody you said that. But you know, just there are things that. Especially Coraline, you know, she's 9. She can't really consent to the world knowing. And so it's a challenge to really keep things as my story, but my story is also mothering them. So I think that is the parts of the book that I grapple with the most.
One thing you really hone in on in the book is how much work it takes to still be poor. And there are a lot of government programs that operate as if every single person who asks for help was capable of scamming them in some way. Of all of your experiences in convincing those organizations that you're not a criminal, what's an event that sticks out as one of probably the worst in that realm?
Well,
or the most unhelpful?
I don't think there was any like outward stuff. It was just, it was so normal for me to answer questions, like fill out, very thick piles of paperwork that was really looking for anything that I had of value. And that included a burial plot, my car. I wasn't allowed to have more than just a few $1,000s in assets. And some states are different. They take like a percentage of your car's value. But for me, it was I wasn't allowed to have more than $3,000 in assets. And so that was just a part of my life. Someone pointed out recently that since I went straight from being in poverty and on food stamps, like to a book deal in 6 months, it's very normal for me to just tell everybody everything, and I didn't even realize I didn't make that connection.
Speaking of that, there was in the recent New York Times piece, you talked openly about your income in the last couple of years and how it's changed, but perhaps not in the way people might think it has when you get a Netflix deal. But because you're not in the same place you were when you were writing about the depths of poverty, do you often find yourself like justifying your success, or does it feel like that?
I think success is really hard. There are no books about like how to be successful. It's how to become successful. But there wasn't really a lot out there that I knew about. I didn't know anyone in my friend group. I still don't really, who had the Netflix series especially. And so it was really isolating at first. I lost a lot of friends, some writer friends, to jealousy, and that was just really confusing and hard. It was also I'm pretty outspoken about. That's the oxymoron. I'm outspoken about being an introvert, so. It was really difficult for me to be a public speaker. I was very suddenly a public figure, and I was having a really difficult time with it. And if I tried to talk about it in my online writers groups, they basically told me to shut up and sit down and enjoy it. And so I became very isolated because of that. Financially speaking, I mean, it's just super weird. Nothing felt real, I think, once you lose everything, you live with this fear that it could possibly happen again. And so for me, it was just like, this can't, I didn't really understand just what it meant to have money in my bank account. And so my reaction was I donated a lot. I loaned money to friends. I had a really hard time with learning to enjoy the success. And one thing, I had to work with my therapist on figuring out how to enjoy it. And one thing that I figured out that I could do was leave massively large tips, like like the kind of tips that, like, whenever I got them, it was like you nudge your coworker and you're just like, look at this. And so that became my goal is, you know, every once in a while you write $100 in the tip line, and that's how I enjoy success, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. You talk in the book about how you were taken off food stamps during your senior year because you couldn't work the required number of hours, and that led to like a major food insecurity. And so if you could you talk about what it was like to balance literal hunger with like the hunger to become a writer and graduate?
I think the hunger part of it was something that I was nervous about people knowing about. I mean, for one, just in social circles, like, I already, like, kind of couldn't do stuff because I couldn't afford a babysitter. And so, like, I didn't want people to not invite me to places because I couldn't afford to, you know, buy a cup of coffee or something. But it was also, I was very nervous about my people knowing that both me and my daughter were food insecure. I kind of lived in fear of someone becoming concerned about me possibly being negligent, and opening up a can of worms with that, with, you know, Child Protective Services or her dad, and so I tried to hide it very well, and that just meant finding a good protein source in a jar of peanut butter,
Right.
really.
Yeah. I think we know with Maid that it had an impact on cultural conversations around what it's like to be poor in America. It kind of pulled the curtain back, and as you shared your story and the real lives of service industry workers. And so what is it that you hope people will take away or start having tougher conversations about after reading Glass?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on who reads it. I mean, a person who wants to learn something will walk away with something much different than a person who is kind of hate reading it and is just looking for more reasons to, I don't know, try and prove that food stamps, everybody's trying to take advantage. Or, I mean, there's a woman on Goodreads who left a review, and she was upset that my child had so much ice cream in this book. And so, you know, I don't have much control over that. The things that I really hope will happen is not necessarily that people in poverty feel more open about asking for help, but that people who have means are more open about the resources that they can offer. And just being upfront with, you know, hey, I can pick her up after school on Thursdays and take her out for something, you know. And I have heard from people who knew me during this time, and that was the one thing. Like, I wish I had said yes when you asked if I could watch your kid, because that to me was just huge, you know, just having a break, you know. I mean, it was usually so I could clean the house or get some homework done or squeeze in some extra work or something. It wasn't like I was going to a spa or anything. It was like I really needed somebody else to watch my kids so I could do other things.
Mm-hmm. On the note of the ice cream commentary, we know people will find a way to be upset about anything, and being a writer means sharing your truth and opening up yourself to having people comment on your life choices. Do you ever indulge the haters?
Indulge them?
Yeah, or do you just brush it off and it's kind of, they're gonna feel the way that they do, or does it make more sense to address it and fight back?
Oh, God, no.
Good.
No.
Yeah.
You don't fuel
Yeah,
the
it's not
you
worth
don't
it.
feed the trolls,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, if I do anything, I find something to write about.
Yeah.
Like the lady with the ice cream thing, like I turned that into an essay for Time magazine.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. You talk a lot about choice in the book. You know, the choice to stay in school meant you'd get to make better choices later on, perhaps. And a lot of the time it seemed like you were having to choose between two not ideal options. What would you say was one of the hardest choices you had to make during that time period that the book takes place? Your senior year, perhaps.
I think just continuing. You know, there's a part of the book where I have $50, and in one hand I'm debating whether or not I'm trying to muster up the courage, I guess, to go to the food bank because this $50 that I have is reserved for my the application fee for grad school. And that was always really difficult to me because it felt like a really big gamble. It felt very selfish. It felt like I was wasting money. You know, graduating college with $50,000 in debt, and especially, you know, I had a newborn within a month, and it really felt like I had done something wrong.
Yeah. You mentioned in class that being poor felt like you were on a roller coaster, that things would be terrible and then they'd get more terrible. But then there'd be this like brief moment of glimmer of hope when everything that might just turn out okay. And I'm sure the moments of feeling okay are a little longer now, but do you ever feel like you're still on the roller coaster?
I mean, my PTSD does.
Yeah.
I mean, leading up to book tour, I mean, I don't know if there's any writers in the audience, but like every morning I woke up thinking I had written the most horrible thing, you know, and nobody was going to read it, and it was just going to be this huge failure. And so my anxiety is still definitely on the roller coaster. And I feel like a lot of my inner work is just keeping that or saving it for therapy.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your opposition to the word resilience and why it makes you a little angry.
There's a part of the book that I refer to as the soapbox. I had listened to, or I had read an interview by Emmy Nefield. She wrote the book Acceptance. It's about her getting into Harvard based on an essay that she wrote about living in foster care. And she compared resilience to the act of acceptance. And I went out in the backyard. We built a she shed for me to write in, and so I trudged up there and I started writing, and I finally got mad, and it was like the greatest feeling ever to just like get it all out there, because over the years, not just, you know, what I experienced personally, but being a speaker for nonprofits, just listening to conversations that surround marginalized populations, this word resilience gets thrown around, and it's recognizing that someone is having a lot of strength despite, you know, everything that's going around them. And, you know, if you lose your house in a flood, you know, but you can build it back, or, you know, that's okay. Like I can see how resilience would apply to that. But when you're talking about a person who is surrounded by systemic structures that are keeping them from improving their life or making more money at their job or achieving a degree in higher education. And I always felt like there was a lot of pressure for me to be proud that I had survived and to not get mad. There's a line in the book that says I didn't have the privilege to feel, because anger would get me nowhere. It would show me the door, actually. And so I felt like I had to be not just like a superhero type of character with being a single mom, but also kind of this like Oliver Twist type of, please and thank you and very polite and because on one hand there was no use in becoming upset that I was kicked off of food stamps because I couldn't work 20 hours a week. It was just this immediate situation of okay, and that was it. And so when I started writing about it, it just kind of came out in this anger for myself and who I was, the person that I was that year, and just how much I had to endure, and how people lauded that as strength. And you've got this, and all of this type of language when really I was terrified and I was struggling and I was hungry. But nobody really wanted to hear about that. They wanted to hear about the good stuff.
Right. I love that you paint a really honest picture of single motherhood and parenthood, especially in dealing with your ex in the book, who, when your daughter goes to visit with him, she comes back it's not all hugs and rainbows and nonstop I love yous. What do you think is one of the toughest things about being a mom, no matter financial class, like no matter what stage you're in? What is the shared experience that you think moms...
Oh man, kids are exhausting. And they're just so gross sometimes. Yeah. Like it's just like, oh. I don't know. It kind of depends. I love my children, but I don't necessarily enjoy children. So, for me, it was just the thing that really exhausted me was I couldn't tap out, Right. Like I couldn't, I'm married now, and he adopted Coraline 4 years ago, and he's been her primary parent. And, we are still collectively exhausted, but there's just this magical thing that you can say that is like, oh, I just can't right now. Can you take her? And I could never say that. It was, if I got a break, it was locking myself in the bathroom while the kids, were pounding on the door, and that was my break. Right. I think, that has been, but for me personally, like I don't like talking about dinner, like I don't like, when my husband knows, like I don't care. I don't want to talk, like I don't want to have the dinner conversation.
It's wild, we have to eat it every day.
And you have to feed them.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's just like, can't you just grab an apple? like really? I have to make this whole thing that you're going to complain about and not eat, and so that to me is definitely the hardest. That I think is pretty universal for everybody.
You say in the beginning of the book too that like your motto for motherhood was kind of like, I'll figure it out. Do you think anyone ever really figures it all out, or you're still figuring it out, or it's always I'll figure it out?
No, for me it's just like setting. I used to joke that I'm not saving for college for them, I'm saving for therapy. I'm just gonna get you on the right path to mental health.
Smart.
To recover from me.
You mentioned a lot too about how your roommates would help out with childcare, or you'd bring Amelia now's story to class, and I'm curious how important you think that like having community is in raising a child, or having that. I mean, those were your roommates, and you're bringing story to class, which is not ideal, I think. But it seems like having that community was really helpful.
Yeah, I had someone reply on what used to be Twitter. She said that she's a professor and she's now going to put right on her syllabus that kids are always welcome to class. And I've been able to go back and hang out with professors who are in the book and really sincerely thank them for allowing me to bring my daughter to school with me. And I think in the book, one thing I say is like she's stinking up the room with her Happy Meal and slurping chocolate milk really loudly, but I wouldn't have been able to be there if I couldn't bring her, and there's so much value in that. The roommates and the babysitters, and it's a college town, and the house that I lived in was like split into all these apartments, and there are all these like 19-year-old kids, and luckily my kid was just like really fun to hang out with. So it did feel like a community approach, to I don't know, just kind of accompanying this feral child who was like usually in like a gymnastics outfit or in just underwear, like running around, and that was normal.
A really powerful scene in the book is when you and Story are sitting there and you tell her that you're pregnant and you say, "This baby is just ours." Can you describe a little more what that moment was like for the two of you?
Yeah. Excuse me. I knew that she was going to ask me whose baby it was. And she did. She's the type of child who, at like 3 or 4 years old, she was looking at pictures of me in my early 20s and asking me where she was. And, I had to explain, you were in an egg in my body. And she just like had this whole existential meltdown. And so it's like she knew, how things happen. And so when I told her that, like, I was kind of bracing myself for that. And when I told her, like, this is just going to be us. It's our baby. And she really liked that. She also thought that I was giving birth to like a 4-year-old. So, once the baby was out, she was not as impressed. Yeah. It was just something that kept me from doing things. So I really, she even remembers that moment, and we talk about it. Remember when we got the fancy haircuts and you took me out for ice cream and told me that I was going to be a big sister. And so, I mean, there's these moments that you have with your kids every once in a while that are just so precious. And I was glad to hear that she remembered that one.
Yeah, that's amazing. Her stuffed animal, Blueberry, plays a prominent role in the book, and he's featured on the cover. How did that come about?
Well, I mean, for any writer, I think, when the publisher comes up with cover mock-ups, it's good to have some friends that you can share those with and laugh at. Because it's just like, oh my goodness. And so I was like, well, why can't it just be a couple of backpacks? Like, because we were both in school, like that makes sense. And my agent really liked that, and so I suggested that. And then going into this, like, I really tried to find ways that I could enjoy publishing a book. Because with Maid, it was so immediate and confusing, and just all of a sudden I was thrown into this world of talking to people for a living, which if you had asked me as a kid, like, what's the one thing that you are not going to do? And it would be talking to people for a living. And so with this one, I really fought to get Blueberry on the cover. He's like right down there. And he modeled very graciously. I had to keep like asking Story to go back down into her room and like collect Blueberry, and so I could take pictures of him. But he's a very prominent comfort item for her. And at one point in the book, she's having a really bad day at school, and she asks me to bring Blueberry to her at school. And so I was thinking about bringing him on book tour, but I recently forgot a stuffed chicken in a hotel, and so I was like, I didn't want to risk losing this very precious that I have never been able to find a duplicate of.
Really?
Like, it's very important as a parent, if they have a stuffed animal that you love, you buy another
Multiple
one.
ones.
But someone also found, I saw that it's also very important to get it dirty. So that you're not like just switching it out and it's suddenly like, oh, look, they had a bath.
Switching to education, there's a professor you speak about in class who was not entirely supportive of your higher education journey. And one of the things that she said was that babies don't belong in grad school. I believe this is the same professor that contributed to you not going to grad school in some way. Do you think that professor is going to have a hard time reading your truths?
I don't know.
Do you ever have a debate with yourself about delicacy versus just being honest about, like, this is what I experienced versus potentially taking someone's feelings into account, even though that's exactly what they were going for?
A friend of mine once said, and I wrote this down and had it everywhere with me. It was on a card, and I would display it as I was writing. She said, there are things that I think people have hoped that I have forgotten, and I haven't, and that's not my problem. And so there's also the Anne Lamott quote of, if people wanted you to write warmly about them, then they should have behaved better.
Yeah.
And so between those two things, like,
do you still think about going to grad school?
No. I think I'm good. Well, I mean, I still can't technically mentor MFA students because I don't have an MFA degree. But I kind of think that's because I'm going to mentor them into not putting money into one. Like, there's so many other ways that you can do this.
Right. What's your best advice for a 30-something single mom who wants to go back to school?
I really appreciated community college, and it's a bummer that 4-year accredited universities are still not really aware that there is a diverse and adverse student population. Like, not everybody is 22 and wearing sweatpants and Uggs to class. Like, I really appreciated the ability to take classes online. It also gave me time to really figure out what I wanted to do. By the time I got to U of M, the University of Montana, the student loans that I took out, it came out to be about $1,000 a month, and that paid my living expenses. So, I mean, it didn't go toward tuition. It was so that I could go to school because I could only work, 10 to 15 hours a week as a full-time student. But I think, there's a lot of ways to get creative with education, especially for writing and the arts. Missoula, for example, has a thing called 406 Writers, and it's, they offer classes and they have really good scholarships, and there's a lot of things that you can do while you're still trying to figure it out. And I mean, once you graduate, it doesn't matter where you took math. Like you can go to community college and sleep through all of these like core classes that they require you to pay for and take, and then because I finished my 2 years at university and transferred, and that worked out pretty well. And I mean, I'm still very much in student loan debt, but.
Right. What was your favorite class that you took that was not writing related?
Favorite class that I took that was not writing related? Trying to think of what. I don't know if there was one.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I guess like one of them, I had to take gym online.
Gym online?
Yeah.
Great.
And it was just like, yeah, sure.
Okay.
I ran today.
Right.
So that, I guess, like, I didn't like it because it was so ridiculous. It still costs money, but it was also kind of fun.
Yeah.
In just that I became very creative in what I could possibly be doing for activity.
Right. I know your writing process for class was different from Maid. I read that you churned out Maid in close to a month. Is that right?
Maid, I think, was...
class, sorry.
Well, Maid was like 2 months.
Maid was 2 months.
Class was 31 days for the rough draft.
Can you share a little more about what that month and that process looked like for you?
Well, it's not like a month straight.
Yeah.
It's like, I have a couple of good days, and then I fall into like, oh my God, this is so hard, and can't get back to it. But the difficulty is really just finding mental space. I mean, for one, this was not a very happy time, and so like I had my playlist of Stephanie's very sad songs, and I really I surrounded myself with college notebooks, with pictures, with these really sad little things that I wrote down in class, and just I had to immerse myself, and it's really exhausting to keep that up. And so I'd have some days where I wrote 500 words, and I'd have days where there was 4,000. But I had agreed on a deadline of October 1st at the end of May, and so I knew that I was going to have to hunker down and do this, and what better thing to inspire that than a very solid deadline. And so I guess I'll tell a story. Story and I were in Seattle. I had a work gig somewhere close, and I was going to go to Benaroya Hall to see Neil Gaiman, and by that point I had his email and his number, and I kept telling him hey, I'm gonna be in town. I was the people that I never respond to personally, and I did get to meet him backstage, and he signed books, and I thanked him for this one speech that he did this one time that kind of became my business plan, and as we were leaving, he kind of pulled me aside, and he said, just reach out if you ever need anything, if you're struggling, if you're blocked. And I said, I am so blocked. I haven't been able to write for 2.5 years. And he said, okay. And he shooed off his assistant, and he's like, this is what you need to do. And he said, get a hotel room. And he said, it should not be somewhere that you actually want to be. And I okay. And then he said, no internet, no phone, no TV, nothing all day. Allow yourself one walk, and in 2 weeks you will have a book written. And he said he did that once. And then he added, "You will go insane." And so I did kind of end up using that. I would like purchase or rent or buy the hotel room that I was in for work. And so I extended my deadline by 2 weeks, and I wrote probably half the book in that time in Livingston, Montana. And then I actually finished it in Seattle. The last weekend, I think, was like 16,000 words in 4 days. Wow. And that was, like you fall asleep with the laptop within reach and roll over, and then roll over again and start again in the morning. There was a lot of bad pizza, a lot of wine. But yeah, I would just start and end the day with tally. I was contracted for 75,000 words, and I'd write the book from start to finish without looking back. So I would just start at 40,200 and whatever, and end at another number.
Wow. I need to know what the saddest song on your sad writing playlist was.
The saddest song?
Or the one that you listened to the most, or was on repeat the most?
It was Hold On by Tom Waits. That was kind of like my marching to school song, and the one that I listened to the most. That was number one on the playlist.
As somebody who also aspired to be a writer starting at a very early age, I asked a lot of writers throughout my time like what their best advice was for writing, and they would consistently always say, just keep writing. And I think that's like tedious to hear, even though it's ultimately just the truth. Do you have any advice that isn't just keep writing?
I have like so right on my knuckles, because that's just what they tell you. Well, so right, write it down. My best advice, I think, was one that I forgot to put in the book. My professor, Walter Kern, at one point in the classroom said, the not writing is just as important as the writing. And so that becomes a mantra, especially when I can't write for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think there was a moment too when you said aloud, like, I want to be a writer. And I think a lot of writers feel a little frivolous saying that the first time because you wonder if it is a viable career path. Is there an exact moment that you felt like, I am a writer? Did it take being published, or was it something that happened prior to that?
Oh, I think the moment I actually felt like a real writer was when I learned that Obama liked my book. So
that'll do it, yeah.
And I was like, man, I've got his thumbs up, like, I'm good.
Yeah. So I read a lot about modern dating, and I noticed in the book you experience what I would call a steady line of disappointing men. A lot of men who ultimately couldn't give you what you need. And I don't have a question, I just want to say we've all been there. You describe some of your sexual encounters explicitly in class, which I think is great. It's kind of a reminder to people reading your story that you're allowed to have a little fun and feel sexy. And how did you make the decision to include those, and how do you feel it adds to the story?
Oh, I don't know if it adds to it or not. I mean, I've heard it's good. But no, I get pregnant with Coraline pretty early on in the semester. Both of my children were conceived my birthday weekend, just very coincidentally, which is fun because I get to call them my best birthday presents ever. Yeah. And, oh, you got me something already. And so it's like been a joke over the years. But I kind of I didn't think I'd be able to write around that. I couldn't just say, and then I was pregnant. I knew I was going to have to explain how that happened. And so I have never honestly, like even in the journals that I have hidden or burned, like I've never written sex scenes before.
Yeah.
And so I read this book by Melissa Febos called Body Work, and like a third of the book is about writing about sex. And I at first was just like, oh, I can skip all of this, like I don't need to know. And then I had this thought of like, well, what if I did? And so I decided to, instead of kind of feeling shame, about the fact that this happened to me, and I was in a situation where I didn't know who the father was. I decided to come at it in the way that I felt at the time. I mean, I joked with my friend that it was hot single mom summer. I was rock climbing. I was out there like dating and having fun and casually, and so deciding to write about it was one thing, and so I added a whole other sex scene just to kind of balance out the bad ones. and my rule was I would not have the word or mention of the male genitalia. I would not actually like say penis or just not mention that it was even there really, and
Sure.
and I not use the word thrust.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
We all appreciate that.
and that is how, those were my only two rules for.
Yeah, that's great.
And they turned out. I think they turned out pretty good.
It's great.
Yeah.
What is next for you writing-wise?
There's a cliffhanger at the end. I did that on purpose because I mean, what happens next? I mean, it's kind of building up to this knowledge that I am going to run out of money, and I knew the day it was a week after my daughter was born, I knew that was going to be, I'd be out of money. And so I spent the summer kind of pounding the pavement to find an apartment in low-income housing. While I took a day and a half, 2 days off of work after she was born, I went immediately back to my job and to trying to find us a place to live that wasn't 50 degrees inside in the wintertime. So, and then, once I had housing security, the apartment that I found was, the rent was $430 a month. And I mean, it was a really tiny space, but like it had a stackable washer and dryer like in the apartment. And that was so huge. And it had a bathtub and it, 2 bedrooms, and it was an amount of money that I knew that I would always be able to afford, because the child support that I received was enough to pay rent and like my phone bill or something. And it freed up so much space in my head to be housing secure, and in a place with like doors that locked from the outside, like before you went into the actual building, and just all of these things that I've had to adjust to really trusting and feeling. And I also didn't know just how freaked out I was to live in this space that I had been in, where people were pretty regularly trying to get in the middle of the night because they were, I don't know, they wanted to sleep there, I guess, or thought it was their house. And that was how I was able to really focus on freelance writing, because fortunately, Coraline was happy as long as she was nursing or asleep in my lap. And so that, if I did this, I could work. And I did. That was how I wrote for a couple of years.
That's great. Well, that's all from me.
Oh,
I think
okay.
we're ready for some audience Q&A.
Hello, everybody. Thank you both so much for being here. It's time to answer some of your virtual questions. Reminder that you can upvote certain questions, so if you want to bribe your friends to get your answer higher up on the list, now is the time for that bribe to be made. First question for you. As your financial position changes, what's the single biggest thing you notice you now take for granted? What's the thing you remind yourself to keep in mind?
I'm not sure if, trying to think of taking for granted. I buy a lot of Christmas presents for my kids. It's kind of ridiculous, but I tell my husband, I'm just making up for many years that I couldn't afford any presents. So, there are times around this time of year that it's just like, I am just buying stuff. The moment of, there's just this moment where you're able to go to the grocery store and not worry about how much money you have in your bank account. And it was just this like, I can buy stuff that is not on sale. Like I can buy like the fancy meats, and just and that was, it still kind of is like just this like, wow, there's so much stuff here that it's almost overwhelming sometimes. But I don't know if that's like taking it for granted, but that's something that I still notice. And just like that I don't have to worry about running out of toilet paper anymore, or like shampoo or toiletries. Like it's still just, it's a moment of awe when I'm like, just go into a cabinet and reach for more toothpaste. Like that never happened before.
How do you feel the TV show realistically portrayed your story?
The TV show, I think, was very emotionally in tune with how my life felt. I love hearing from people that the show really stressed them out. And I do. Like some people were saying like, oh, I had to stop watching it. It was just so stressful. And I'm like, you need to get back on your couch and you need to be there with her in that moment. Because they really captured how it feels to not have any money. And that was kind of the thing that I wondered about the most. And the show, of course, is very fictionalized, and I really appreciated that. I knew it was going to be hard to watch a visual representation of emotional abuse, especially for my daughter to see. It doesn't help that Nick Robinson has an uncanny resemblance to my ex. But, at one point she turned to me and she asked, like, is that what he was really like? And I said, yeah, that's pretty on the nose. So I kind of appreciated the distance in, the different names. And when I heard that they were going to do that, I felt a little bit of relief in that sense.
Amazing. Next question. I'm curious about your revision process with writing the way you describe. Do you look back at your 16,000 words and see nuggets that really sing, or mostly a shitty first draft?
There's times that I'll be in conversation with someone and they'll like quote me, and it's like, man, that sounds pretty good. Because this process of not just writing a whole entire book about yourself, it's not just over when you hit send. It's, after that there's months of editing. There's the copy edits. Like, I had to read through the book. I must have read it like 10 times. And then I had a little bit of space, and then I read it for the audiobook. And there are parts that still make me cry. I mean, the night that I tell Amelia that I'm pregnant, we go back and get into our jammies and watch a movie, and there's a line that says, I slept really well, and I hadn't slept very well for a long time, or something. And there are parts of the book that I really love and really appreciate, and I think that's probably the most important thing as an author, that there is like a true, not just admiration for me. It's there are parts of it that I'm really grateful that I was able to produce and share with the world.
A lot of low-income people don't feel permission to major in liberal arts or creative fields due to the lack of financial security. Do you have any comment on that?
I think that's the most interesting art. I mean, there's so much art out there that is a bunch of white dudes. And I want more art from people who have experienced life in the margins of society. Those are the interesting stories to me. Those are the narratives that we often don't hear. And it's a tragedy that it's pretty unaffordable to write or to be an artist. And so for low-income people, it's just not something that they're allowed to do or able to do. And I think that's just one of the things that we're really missing out on as a society.
I agree. What was or could have been the best thing that Story's kindergarten teacher did to best or better support her that year?
Toward the end of the year, so all the kids had like student of the month or something, and it was like, they had been extra good or attentive or done something like to earn a certain amount of stars. And the last month of school, my kid got student of the month, and she was just so proud of herself. I bought her like a new shirt for the assembly, and her teacher was really genuinely proud of her. Like I knew that she was, and she probably didn't have to say in the ceremony that she had to work very hard to be like student of the month, but I think by that point of the year, like the admiration was pretty genuine.
Is talking openly about your life to random people in person a relief, or is it exhausting?
I would not say it's a relief. No, it's very depleting. There's only so much an introvert can do, and I did that like last Monday. And so like to be on book tour, it's a certain kind of stamina that goes beyond what I think is humanly possible. And I'm just over the halfway mark. And so, I mean, to say it's exhausting or depleting is like just, barely scraping the surface there. It's, there are times that I go to a speaking gig and come home and it takes me like a day to recover. And it's not just, the tiredness of traveling and stuff. It's, you know, I'm talking about trauma, and I'm talking about times that are really difficult for me. And in order to talk about that very authentically, I have to, you know, recall what it felt like, and it takes a toll. And I recently discovered beta blockers, and that has helped quite a bit. But you know, other than that, like exhaustion doesn't even cut it. it's like this like really weird kind of tired that, you know, it's almost feeling like you're not really there, I guess.
How does it feel being back in Washington? Does it feel like home to you?
Oh, I love it here. You know, it's been a while since I lived near the tulips, so like, oh, there's my second grade teacher. I was wondering if you're going to show up. I do, like, there is like a certain amount of familiarity that I have, especially for Deception Pass, you know, Bowman's Bay and that whole area. And my traveling companion, my assistant and social media manager, my manager, basically, she tells me what to do all the time. She had never been to the West Coast before, and so like it was fun to walk around Pike's Place and show somebody like how beautiful it is. But I had to keep saying like, it's just because it's sunny, like really. Like, I know it's really pretty, but trust me. But I really, I love coming here, and I discovered recently that the drive back and forth isn't so bad, and because before it was just like I was driving with very small children, and but no, I would live here if I could afford to.
I know we talked about the advice from fellow writers to write, but I've also heard the piece of advice to read. So do you have any book recommendations for any of us of what you're reading right now?
Oh, I think the last book that I read that I'm still think about just so vividly was Ashley C. Ford's book, Somebody's Daughter. And I read memoir almost exclusively, so that was one that stuck out. I really liked Matthew Desmond's book, Evicted. That book was really amazing in how he was able to be an invisible narrator, but still really authentically represent what it's like to live in places where people shouldn't have to live. And my friend wrote a book a year ago called Black American Refugee. Her name's Tiffany Drayton. That's also a really amazing memoir, and also talks a lot about going to school and college.
Amazing. What are your kids' trajectories and hopes as far as you want to share with us tonight?
Story really wants to go to UW. She, every time we're here, she's like, can't we just move here? And I remind her that I recently purchased a horse for her, and it probably wouldn't work well to have it in Seattle proper. And I don't know what she wants to be. Like, she goes between, like, she's really into CSI, and so like she wants to be like a criminal investigator and work for the FBI, and then I don't know. She's all over the place sometimes, but I think that's the one that she talks about the most. Coraline is like, she's just this really funny, like she says things that are just hilarious, and she's so different from me and Story. Like, Story is just kind of copy paste, and it's fun to hang out with her because it's like hanging out with myself, you know, like we don't really have to talk, like we find the same stuff funny, like we both have the same like resting bitch face energy, and it's really fun to hang out with her. She's a really just incredible human being. And then Coraline is like the exact opposite in every way. Like, at one point, Story was just like, why doesn't she look like us? Because she's just this very sunny, you know, bright blue eyes, curly hair, blonde, you know, very happy, you know, just like very optimistic, like nothing really affects her. And we have both just had these moments of like, what is that? Yeah. And so it's fun I have no idea what Coraline's gonna do. Like I don't know, she's probably gonna live at home and be like a YouTube influencer or something. I don't know. She's smart and she's doing well in school, so that's all I care about at this point.
Have either of them shown any interest in writing at all?
Yeah. I mean, Story at one point in kindergarten was very adamant about wanting to be a writer, and I was just like, oh man, like I mean, writers are kind of a weird sort of bunch anyway, and like I really can only hang out with other writers most of the time, just because we just have a really weird way of looking at the world, and especially if you're a freelancer, it's like my kid has a temper tantrum, like, oh, I can turn that into an essay and sell it to, you know, the Washington Post. And so, but it's also just like, it's a tough world out there for a writer. And Coraline, I think, like, every once in a while she'll work on her novel, and it's really, I don't know, it's really cute that they have both like wanted to be what they think I am.
All right, well, we're about out of time. I'm gonna ask one more question. Has to do a little bit with the future for you. Do you ever see yourself branching out on subject matter, or maybe even writing fiction or children's things?
Oh, no one's ever asked me about children's. No, I mean, I wrote in a journal since I was 10 years old. I really only know how to write like I do. I am horrible at making shit up. It's just, and you know, no one will see my poetry until I am dead. So you guys are stuck with me writing about myself. Yeah.
And we've got a new one coming out soon-ish, in the near future-ish.
Do I have a new one?
Anything coming down the pipeline for you?
Oh man, the day before this book was published, I got a text from my editor, like, I'm excited to talk about the next one. And I was like, just give me a day.
Well, I think we're all looking forward to it whenever it comes, but take your time and rest.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you to the both of you.
There you go.
Have a great rest of your night, everybody. Thanks so much.
Come on home. Come on home. No, you don't have to be alone.